Welcome to On Block Off Block by AeroCloud. On Block Off Block explores the exciting and ever-growing aviation industry with guests working in and with airports, and is hosted by AeroCloud CEO George Richardson.
In this episode, George speaks to Ashley Thorsen, Director of Operations at Gerald R International Airport, about the sliding doors moment that led her into a career in aviation, some of GRR's innovation initiatives, and key advice for young people seeking a career in the space.
Right, welcome Ashley, welcome to On Block Off Block. We have a really cool story of how we effectively met, how our paths continually crossed, and eventually then doing a deal with the airport that you're at now. So the sort of backstory about when I was raising my Series A round for AeroCloud, you actually met with Liz, now a board member at AeroCloud, at a wedding in Italy, I believe.
That's right.
And we were talking to you about the airport that you were at previously, I believe, about some software solutions. And at this wedding, she said what she does and you'd said what you do. And effectively, the two AeroCloud shall meet through this exchange. And then she ended up very graciously investing about $12 million in AeroCloud. So it was a very productive meeting for me that I wasn't even there. So thank you very much for putting a good word in. In addition, you're one of the most driven executives that we've had the pleasure with working with. I really enjoy spending the little time that we both have together at conferences. The airport that you're currently working at, Gerald R. Ford, an incredibly fast-growing airport in the US, actually getting the fastest-growing title, I believe, in 2023. Your role of the ops manager is one of the most exciting roles within that airport as you operate at capacity. And we're very much looking forward to providing you with even more solutions in the future that are either deployed or not deployed yet, specifically around self-service. And also, thank you very much for your airport hosting the last year's conference. And we ran one of our most innovative advertising plays at the airport, where we took some of the FID screens and the baggage screens with some AeroCloud advertising ahead of the conference, which went down a real treat, and we got loads of great compliments. So welcome to On Block Off Block. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited. Yes, it has been a journey for sure.
Cool. So for the people that are listening, could you give me an idea of how you got started in your career, and what was it about aviation that attracted you to stay within aviation?
Absolutely. So my story is kind of twisted and irregular. So when I go to speak to students or I go to talk to people, it's never the path that I planned on doing. I was supposed to be a school teacher. I was supposed to be a meteorologist. I went to school undergrad to actually play softball. So I didn't even really know what I wanted to do with my life. Sociology was my major. Went back to school to be an air traffic controller at Hampton University, and then finally ended my educational path at Purdue for aviation and aerospace management. But to get there, I had to fail a couple times and recognize through that whole path that failure wasn't fatal for me. Here I am at the Gerald R. Ford, and I am absolutely loving everything about it and what I do and all the people. So, started out originally as a military logistics contractor. So I was moving military applicants from the military entrance processing station across the country via different methods of transportation, and then was able to say, you know what? So one of my coworkers, he was a pilot. I was like, that looks really cool. I think I'd like to try that out. Why don't you work on getting your pilot's license? So started getting my student pilot's license, and then was like, I need to know the other side of that voice on the air traffic control tower. How do they do it? What do they do? So went back to school to be an air traffic controller, went out to Oklahoma, got a bid out of 22,000 people. I was one of 2,000 that got selected in 2015. And went to an en route simulation down at the Mike Maroney Aeronautical Center in Oklahoma City. The unfortunate thing was I had separation error on one of my things, and it caused me to not pass the actual simulation or the evaluation. So I packed up my car. I went from Oklahoma, drove back to Raleigh, North Carolina, and thought life was over, until I was sitting in a bar one day with an old person from Oklahoma, and she was like, hey, Raleigh-Durham International is hiring. You should come try to be a ramp tower supervisor, because she too was doing the same thing. So that led me to my path in Raleigh-Durham, which was my home airport. Started there as a ramp tower supervisor, then moved to the airport operations, and then picked up at South Bend International in the snow and the cold, which I've never been a part of in my entire life. And then here we are at Grand Rapids,
There you go.
But
It's
2020 was
funny.
my leave. So yeah, 5 years later.
Yeah, it's funny how serendipity happens like that, right? And I often do a lot of thinking about like people that are very opportunistic in the sense that they say yes more than they say no. And I know you're meant to say no more often to become more productive and all that sort of stuff. But when you're starting out, you've got to say yes to more things than you say no at, right? Because otherwise you wouldn't have taken that extra drink with that person at the bar. The paths crossing there is nuts, right?
Kind of uncanny, but you got to get uncomfortable to finally eventually be comfortable. That's how
100%.
how
And
I feel.
my journey is very similar. And what's interesting about industry, and when I speak to industry people, because I'm not from typically industry as well, and even though I've built this business over the last 5 years, I've been studying it 2 years prior to that. But I met a guy in a coffee shop who ended up being my co-founder, and then we ended up creating this company. So I never set out effectively to be in this industry. However, it drags you in, and what you find is a lot of people build long careers. I mean, some of my customers in ops positions have been at the same airport for 35 years, for example, which is just phenomenal. So what do you think it is about the industry that keeps you in? And could you ever see yourself doing anything different now?
Now, no, it's in my blood, right? Controlled chaos, the logistical changes every single day, the new partnerships, but mostly the people. Throughout my entire career, I've stayed in touch with every single person that has meant to me or been a mentor or helped me get to where I need to go. And, it's such a small industry. You want to be careful when you are leaving those places, but it is very important. Just the passion, you got to let it flow because some days are worse than others. And when people see that, it's infectious. So I think working here has really brought a lot of positivity out in me and then in all my coworkers. And it's infectious.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we get into the root pieces and responsibilities of your role at GRR, you also organize a snow conference. You're on some of the panels and involved with some of the governing bodies. And then in addition, you run some innovation days at GRR. Can you tell us a little bit about those and what your keen interests are? I know we talked a lot about stuff that Aerocloud doesn't do with autonomous vehicles, robots, stuff to help with ground handling. You do a lot of stuff that with manned snow machines, et cetera, et cetera. Can you give us a sort of introduction there?
Sure thing. So the Ford Flight, the Ford Launchpad of Innovative Technologies and Entrepreneurship in partnership with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, Southwest, AvFlight, West Michigan Aviation Academy, we put together a spot for ideas to land. So this airport opens up its doors and says, hey, we want to be innovative, creative. We want to welcome people to local businesses to West Michigan to help our economic development. Come create your stuff here, try it, test it. We'll bring investors, and then they can kind of try out the product for free, see it during a demo day, work through it, and then say, okay, this is going to be the future. So let's start getting on board with what's moving ahead. For the flight program, I've been able to work with a couple of different projects. Aerotrek Robotics was one where a FOD autonomous detection robot was checking the apron spaces for foreign object debris. Aero Analytics was doing AI sensors to see how large carry-on bags were for the capacity for the aircraft so that it prevented you from getting overloaded and have to check bags after the fact, just helped with operational delays. We did one for a perimeter solution around data speed, which was autonomous vehicle driving around the perimeter of our airfield to check out wildlife, to check out our perimeter security. So moving on board with TSA, the FAA's wildlife. Pretty cool things that I've been able to be a part of. And my role in that is basically, here's the FAA rules and regulations. Here's where you can and can't go. And then here's how I can facilitate and make you connected to the pieces of the puzzle you need for the airport environment.
Sure. I think a major role for executives now and what I've observed over the last 7 years is that the guys that are not partaking in that are going to definitely get left behind. And you do a great job of that. And 100% the airport do a good job of that as well. And the biggest thing for new technology into our market now, and the real reason why Aerocloud's had such fast growth in the last 2 years, not necessarily the last 5 years, is because it takes an awful long time to get that referenceability and the time to market and the sales piece with regards to the sales and the procurement cycles. That's what, as a collective, in my opinion, the aviation needs to sort out. So the fact that you're doing that is absolutely fantastic, and other people should definitely be doing that. So do you invite other people from other airports as well and educate them on how that they could speed up those procurement cycles and try stuff new? Because that's a barrier that holds a lot of people back in roles like yourselves.
We do. During that demo day, we invite, again, people around the area, other airports, FAA partners, TSA partners, airline partners, to kind of see like, hey, this is where we're going. We're the ones trying it out. You should also jump on board. And we've had it be successful at other places. Synapse is one that we had recently where they did the overhead announcements and they put it into sign language on our FIDS boards for our passengers. So not only is that like, ADA, it's guest experience, it's customer travel through our airport, and they'll remember that we took that extra step to help them. And then other airports jump on board.
Yeah, 100%. And I've seen that in action as well when flying through the airport. And that's really great. Okay, cool. To the bread and butter then of your role and how it's changed sort of in the last couple of years and maybe how we've worked together as well. That'd be great if you could sort of introduce that, and then we can get into some of the details.
Sure. So Raleigh-Durham was a medium hub size airport. So operations was strictly focused, not by any means in a bad way, but kind of siloed. Your airfield was your job duty function, and that's what you did. You also networked throughout, obviously, all your interactions. But then I went to a small hub airport at South Bend, and that's where you do everything. You touch everything. You're a part of every decision. Logistical challenges come up, and you're the person they look to. So it was those solutions that were out there in the environment that we got to test and try out. And AeroCloud was one of them that was, exciting to get a part of. Our FID system, seeing how that helps or interacts or, impacts passengers as we're going. Baggage claim systems. So that was a small part of it. And then here at Grand Rapids, still a small hub airport, but a different platform for ideas to be tested out here. And the capital infrastructure here is incredibly growing. So we have so many projects going on that has been, for my career path, a really good professional development in order for me to maybe run an airport one day, to see that behind the scenes.
Oh, 100%. And it's just nuts, the general local economic growth of where the airport is situated, right? I mean, I visited, I think, the airport maybe 3 times. In 3 times, I've seen buildings go up. I've seen new restaurants come in, way more alternatives than they had the first time I visited. It must be nuts for the people around the airport as well to see that economic impact. And the role that you do has a direct impact on medical innovation, education innovation, local government spending, and adoption and allocation for grants for making your community better. I think people don't often give airports the credit they deserve to how impactful they are to local economy. Do you agree?
I do agree. And our leadership team does a really good job of going out to find the money. They're beating down the doors. They're going to DC, talking to local officials to say, hey, this is a huge driver for our West Michigan aviation and community. Let's make sure we're taking care of the people who are flying with us. So
absolutely.
Yeah, our capital infrastructure is crazy right now, but it's a wonderful thing to be a problem, right?
Well, it's a wonderful thing to be part of. And that brings us nicely on to my next question is like, you're operating at 100% capacity consistently now across the airport. So what are the sort of key things that you've learned, and what are the challenges that you've had to come over recently that could be shared?
Sure, of course. I would say as an organization, staffing, right? Making sure that we're properly staffed for the growth of the airport and the community. I would say learning how to say no. So as a person in my position, I get tasked with a lot of things, which are wonderful, but making sure that I can balance them well and equally. So I'm not giving only 30% to all the things I'm doing. That's a big also like personal thing for me. And then work-life balance at home, right? Your family, what you're doing in life will trickle, and this will trickle into that. So making sure that you're taking care of that. And that's probably my biggest challenge as a female in this position, is as a mom, a wife, a leader, trying to make it all come together, which we do well. But as an organization, I think having those people you can count on in the communication and the partnerships that you have with your stakeholders is huge. And that's helped me be successful, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny, right? You spend more time at work than you do at home. So if you're not enjoying your work, then you're probably not going to enjoy things at home as much. And if you're not enjoying things at home, then it'll probably have an impact on work. So I like to think, and I do a lot of internal sort of thinking out loud at our business about how having being happy at work has a massive impact at home and vice versa, and that sort of circle of work and life opposed to a balance. I I don't necessarily 100% agree with the balance. What I see is I think that work should provide for you and in your personal life, and then your personal life should provide for the work, and you should be consistently happy in that sort of nice cadence. And then, like you say, setting sort of boundaries of what is possible and what's not possible with regards to your personal life is also massively key. But I bet you're like me, is that you really, really care about your job. And sometimes on a weekend or whatever, you're either called into stuff and you just can't help it because you love what you're doing. Is that right?
That is correct. You don't want to leave people hanging. Your name's attached to that work, right? One challenge I did want to say that's really important for the industry to make sure we're doing is getting out there and talking about what we do to younger people, bringing in the younger workforce that's going to take our jobs and advocating for that. I'm the vice president of our Great Lakes chapter for women in aviation. So hosting Girls in Aviation Day is really important to me because I didn't start out as an operations manager. I wanted to be an air traffic controller, but it's okay to show people that, it might not be the way you think it is, but you can eventually get there. So I think we need to do a better job of that in the industry of going out to the schools, doing the community events. And yes, we're all burnt out, right? But in some certain way, but giving that effort to them that somebody gave to me, my mentors gave to me ahead of time.
Sure. Yeah, that's a big thing. And that doesn't just span airports as well. I think that spans like industry stakeholders like our companies as well. And there's probably some thinking at the right stage for a company like ours to contribute to that as well. And I think that when you look at post-COVID, America wasn't impacted in the airport scenes as much as, say, Europe, but I speak with a lot of European leaders. And during COVID, when airports were put completely on pause, that a lot of people reskilled and went away from industry. So they've spent the last 4 or 5 years attracting these people back, and that's been a huge cost. And to try and drive that with lots of passion is a huge expense on their energy as well. And that staffing issue is alleviated by the use of AI and, products like ours and others that you mentioned, but it doesn't ultimately solve the person who really is the executor at the end of the process, in our world, because things change so frequently. You could have a huge weather event. You could have God forbid, a security event that the airport needs to close in a certain way. There's lots of processes to follow, et cetera, et cetera. And, that human element is super important. And I'm in full support of that. And I think everybody listening would as well. So when we're on the topic of challenges, what are some of the biggest challenges that you faced in your career, whether at GRR or not? And what are the particular projects or initiatives that you're super proud of on the other side of that?
So I guess most recently I can speak to it. I am not a finance girl. I don't have the ability to look at a data sheet or an accounting sheet at the time and say, okay, I understand this and we're doing this and we're good in the red, we're in the green, that kind of stuff. But luckily, last year I was selected for the Todd Halpely AAA Entrepreneurship and Innovation Scholarship winner. It was $10,000, and I got to go to the University of Virginia Darden School of Business. And I was there for a week, just immersed in all the accounting documents you could ever think of. And actually today, we had our Q1 budget meeting, and I was able to understand the lines. And I think that not only helps me personally, I go home, my husband's super happy that I know how to budget, but also I think it's, and we're still working on that, but it's also like
selective budgeting, is it?
Exactly. It's a work in progress. But I think here I'm able to distribute my money better now for my resources that my teams need. And I think that will help Grand Rapids as I hopefully, progress in my career here to show that financial health is very important to an organization. And I think not my weakest point, but I think training in our environment is hard because of the turnover. So ensuring that people are taken care of, understand their roles and responsibility is a weak point that I'm trying to work on for my future leaders to make sure that my transition when I go hopefully a higher position and they get my position, that it's seamless and it's easy for us all to be successful.
Yeah, 100%. And that's exactly how you run a commercial company and a commercial entity. And, this is my life's work at Aerocloud effectively. And my life or my week effectively is to make sure that I become obsolete in every process so that process can scale. And then you got to find people that can join that journey and make that process even better than when you left it. I think often in the roles that you're in now and targeting as well are hyper generalist. but you need to make sure that you can focus in on some of the problems and understand what you're doing, and you've demonstrated that. So yeah, all the best of that. I mean, the finance thing has never been my strongest point. I've always had very clever people helping me with that. I'm not really that good with the unemotional side of finance. I run my business very much from my heart, and I really care about what we're doing in respect to spending and resource allocation. And obviously over time that doesn't really work, and everything needs to be run by a spreadsheet. So I've been very fortunate to work with some great people, and I'm sure you do too at GRR, and make sure you take them out for a beer as well, because they're a real backbone to that understanding. So let's talk a little bit on the Todd Hapoldley. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Yep. Cool. I was there when you got your huge giant check. So congrats on that. It was a great time. I was stood up clapping like everybody else was. It was an awesome thing to share in that room. There was a lot of people in that room as well. So that's really good. What advice would you give someone looking to pursue a career in airport ops or aviation management, and specifically maybe applying for that award?
I would say in general, don't be afraid to be vulnerable and put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to be in the room with all the CEOs and the COOs and walk up to somebody and introduce yourself, because that's the face. When I see your face and I see your resume slide across my desk, there's a better connection for you to possibly get that job that you might be trying for, or find a mentor to put in your toolbox. That's how I found many women in this industry to help me, get over humps that I was struggling with in the beginning of my career. And I keep them there to pull them out when I really need that great advice, not just women, but men too. But that would be my biggest thing, is just be vulnerable and don't be afraid to fail. That's where you learn the most. That's where you learn the most about yourself, about what you want to do, your strengths. And it's how you react to the situation. It's pulling yourself out of it and saying, okay, this was just a day. Let's leave it in the past and let's keep it moving, because just like an air traffic controller, you can't dwell on it. You gotta keep the operation going. So that's my advice.
Yeah, 100%. That's great advice. Okay. And in terms of, as we look to the future, what are you most excited about with regards to airport aviation management, and any up and coming trends or technologies that you think will be game changers that you've seen that could share or discuss?
Let's see. So sustainability, right? Everyone's big on the sustainability section of it, whether it's through ACA, whether it's actually what you're doing in your carbon footprint to help that. I think anything environmentally friendly is going to be good for an airport, trending towards that emissionless stuff. Let's see. I think that for operations, it's just every day is something completely different. So coming up with solutions to help operations people in the field. I don't specifically know of one or two, but we've been, with the flight program, it's just really nice to have different opportunities. Let's see, any of the system integrations that we're doing. So the terminal enhancement project we're building with AeroCloud, common use management, that kind of stuff is evolving, and just exciting to see that we might be the first. We're the first building CONRAC, consolidated rental car facility in the state of Michigan. So that's cool to be a part of.
Yep.
I think just in the projects for me, like being a part of the capital projects and understanding the budget, and then the construction size, and it all coming together to watch it grow.
Those integrations are key, and as you say, across key systems as well. And one of the sort of the negatives of our business effectively is if we ever make a mistake, it's kind of in the news, right? If you have a wingtip violation because the system has not helped you, or you've overridden the system and made a mistake, if you can't check in passengers and Delta has to revert to boarding passengers with paper, etc., it's all of a sudden, a news article,
Right.
and all of our mugshots are already in the press, right? So, those integrations are really important. I do a lot of thinking about how much data is siloed across airports, and you're a relatively new customer for AeroCloud, but when I look at like the depth of data that we collect on behalf of airports and put into one system, that's definitely better than the age-old thing. However, I go to about 50 airport visits a year, and everybody talks to me about their systems not communicating, and you have a real opportunity, not just with our product, but with other products and the vendors that you've got working at your airport. You have a real opportunity to cure that. And that's really because you're not fighting a load of legacy debt. like other airports are facing. I don't mean debt in monetary, I mean debt in technology and where that data lies. Your team have a very succinct plan for that data. And that's something that I think a lot of airports can learn from, whether it's through a consultancy gig or whether it's worth spending time with vendors like ourselves and just explaining where all of this data lies and how and what you need from that data. That's a very productive conversation for anybody in your position, surely, you know?
Yeah, we actually got in a room and sat down, like kind of like a request for bid, request for questions, and said, okay, the end users, what do you need from these systems? And we were able to eliminate several systems to be able to tailor it all to one AeroCloud system to say, okay, here's your reports for accounting, here's your ops information, here's your airlines, common use gate management. So that's been very helpful to just put it all on one platform for everybody to speak the same language.
Yeah, 100%. And innovation is often in subtraction. I mean, when you look at your day and you look at your calendar, and if you haven't made some removing of some frequent meetings, you haven't tidied up a team or tidied up a process, or questioned a process, et cetera, then that subtraction doesn't therefore happen, and you can't actually make those leaps and bounds forward. So your team have done an exceptional job on that, and that should be road mapped and displayed for other airports that want to grow fast. One of the things that I love working with is that title, because as by default, working with you as a very fast growing airport, we can say, well, we only work with the fastest growing airports, et cetera, et cetera. And one of our first customers was SRQ, that had the fastest growing airport up until you guys took it from them. So we're very, very proud to be working with you, and thank you for your custom. So in terms of personal stuff, I mean, I know you relatively well in a professional capacity, but I follow you on LinkedIn and you share some of your sort of personal capacity and your interest for baseball. Not a huge baseball fan personally, but I have been to a couple of baseball stadiums because usually on the weekend, I can't meet with airports when I'm traveling in the UK. So I have a lot of time to myself. And recently in Boston, I've been to baseball ground there, which I believe is the oldest Fenway Park, right?
I don't know if it's the oldest, but it's one of the best. I know that for sure.
Right. Okay, cool. Well, I got the cap and everything. And my VP of sales, Jeff, is a big baseball fan. So you've visited every baseball stadium, or about to visit every baseball stadium in the US. Where did that start? And dare I say it, how did that weird obsession with baseball start?
Absolutely. So I've got one more in August. I'm going to the Minnesota Twins versus the Detroit Tigers, and that will tie up all 30 MLB stadiums across the country.
Okay.
It started in 2004 at the Red Sox. So 2004 Red Sox Yankees Game 4 of the championship series, which is a documentary on Netflix now. Yep. I got tickets with my college roommate, Andrea, and her dad gave us the tickets to go to the game. The Sox were down. They weren't going to the World Series. And all of a sudden, Big Papi hits a home run. Actually, I think it was a grand slam to win the game. And then they came back that year and won the World Series. So because of my college softball, I was like, okay, I got to see more of these stadiums, the nature, the feeling, the culture, all of the things I want to know more about it. So when I worked for the military logistics company, when I would go to big cities, because that's where the MEPs were housed, I would try and line them up with when baseball games were happening. And then it just kind of became like this, all right, I'm going to do this bucket list thing. And that started in 2004, 2025, here I am tying it up. I wanted to do it, before I was 40, and we're going to be able to check that one off and then maybe start golf, football. I don't know yet.
And do you watch baseball quite frequently? Because I was shocked at the amount of games baseballers have to play a year. I mean,
hundreds.
It's absolutely nuts. I mean, I know they get paid a lot of money, but they really earn their money, right?
They do, yeah. I have been watching the women's not World Series yet, but the Super Regionals for softball. But yeah, the Tigers are doing really well this year, so I'm very engaged in their path. Hopefully, they had the number 1 seed there for a while, beating the Dodgers, who won last year. But for me, I can't do it on TV. TV is really hard. But when I'm there and I'm feeling it, and my daughter's a part of it now. So her first game was 3 months old. So she's doing it with me now, which has been really cool. And then
how many has she been to?
She's been to 4.
Okay,
and then all my friends who traveled with me to each one of these games have an invitation to come back for the Twins game, because we're going to celebrate with as many people as we can that have done this journey with me.
Very cool. Well, that just adds to an already illustrious career professionally as well, and makes you a super, super interesting person to reach out for, not just baseball, but the Snow Conference, Women in Aviation, AAAE, and scholarships, and obviously Gerald R. Ford as well. So if people do want to get in touch with you, what is your preferred method of communication?
You can email, LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of, and I try to be as active as possible on social media to promote my passion for what I do. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for us finally doing something together at this scale. We're super proud to be working with you. You've got a great opportunity for you, singular, and the airport has got a great opportunity to create some amazing things. So thank you so much for spending the time, and thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you for having me, and best of luck with all your endeavors.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to On Block, Off Block by AeroCloud. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review, and remember to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date with future episodes. On Block, Off Block is hosted by George Richardson and produced by Alex Greaves.